Hello and welcome to B Shifter. John Vance here along with Josh Blum and Nick Brunacini today. And we're going to be talking about command presence and how an IC should sound. How do they gain confidence with the people that are around them? And really what it's like to model the right behavior, the sound, and the behaviors that a good IC should have. So you guys have probably always heard some bad examples of this. We bring it up a lot, right? We share it with each other, but we're about the positive here. So we want to share a really good example to start things off with, to show what a good IC sounds like and starting things off. And this is all out of a column that Alan Brunacini wrote a while back, and we just republished it in our B Shifter Buck Slip. And it's the power of words. It's not just the IC's words, but their delivery that determines the incident outcome. And there's so much when we talk about command. If you start it off crummy at the beginning, it's not going to turn out very well. And that even goes to the tone and the tenor that an incident commander has. So let's start off with going to Las Vegas, and we'll listen to this IC number 1, start off the incident, and we'll talk about it when we come back.
Dispatch Engine 3. Engine 3. Dispatch Engine 3 is on scene of a small 2-story apartment building with a working fire showing from the Alpha side second floor window. We're going to be stretching lines for fire attack to the second floor, Alpha side, for fire control and primary search. This is going to be the offensive strategy. Everyone continue in to level 1. This is going to be Cordova Command.
Dispatch copies. Engine 3 is establishing Cordova Command working fire.
Command Engine 103, level 1. Seaburn 3, same traffic. Seaburn 3, if you can help with catching a water supply for us, and then have your crew pull a second line off of my engine to the first floor to check for extension and primary search.
Command Seaburn 3 copies. Assist with a water supply. Stretch the second line of the first floor with par 3.
So some great radio traffic there from Las Vegas, starting us off. So what's your thoughts on not only that initial radio report, but how that IC sounded?
One thing about that communications, it's really clear because their first 2 company officer gives that radio report from the front seat of the truck so that they're not out engaged doing work. So it just makes it, that much clearer, and they can really think through and give a good size up. The tone of, how it sounded, like clearly, command presence, confidence, knew what he was doing, described what he was seeing, was, clearly thinking about the other work that needed to happen. So, like you said, John, it all starts right there with the initial radio report, maybe the most important communications that happens on the fire ground. It sets the stage for the rest of the event.
You're in agreement.
Total. Well, and if you look at it, it's, there's 2 things going on. Is you've got the system that all the people operate in. Well, the reason that initial radio report sounded that way is that fire department made the investment to say, this is what our incident operations are going to look like. So they train everybody to that standard or level or ability to operate there. And then the training kind of drives that then. So is that as you continue to use the system, it's got the refinement built into it. So it captures really the most critical words to start that have the biggest meaning to convey what's going on at that incident scene. So you listen to that report, we're all sitting here. They're on the scene of a smaller 2-story apartment with a working fire on the second floor showing from the front of the building. All of us firefighters, through their training and career and everything else, that all means the same thing to us. So it creates understanding of the arrival order then as it starts to put it in place. So the second due company is, in this case, they had an assignment form immediately, and that assignment was something they expected to do based on the initial report they gave. The third in company is staging now, and they're thinking, okay, they got the second floor covered and the first floor. We'll probably end up being assigned to go, I don't know, on deck and the Alpha side. So what it does is it sets up the regular front end to that offensive fire attack for that building. And it puts them in the best position to put it out as quickly as possible, end the event, and go back into service to go to the next call.
Well, and like your dad said before, if you have a crummy initial radio report, you often can't recover from that. So having the initial radio report crisp, clear, concise, to the point with a good IEP really matters here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's where you build those skills too in training, as you talk about it and say, this is what this looks like for us. And then, based on your deployment capability and everything else is, kind of the time curve of companies getting to the scene that's how you figure out this is what our operations look like.
Well, the number 2 point that he has here is when you listen to air traffic controllers, pilots, and effective ICs, they seem to have a flattened tone in their voice. They sound clinical. They all sound the same. Make a conscious effort to identify and eliminate your voice inflections and accents. Control and manage your speaking mannerisms. Practice sounding highly interested, awake, and connected, calm and cool to the strategic level's ongoing communication flow.
I mean, we're a profession. So when we're describing something to ourselves and telling everybody else what's going on, it shouldn't be like we're seeing our first fire or doing our first size up. So, there shouldn't be excitement. We should be expecting to pull up and, see a fire if we were called to a fire. So, going through that process of just training and getting comfortable with the system and what is expected of me to say, and then practicing that over and over and over again builds that confidence. And then confidence comes that, firm voice, and you can stabilize a little bit more, and you're actually thinking through instead of using what happens far too often, the emotion gets involved with it. And once one person gets emotional, then everybody gets ramped up, and then we're oftentimes not making good decisions then either.
I find that's true. Like when you have screaming over the radio, when you get there, it's almost like dealing with drunk people. It really is. It's like they're intoxicated. They're out of sorts. They've gotten too jacked up. And we all know people in our fire departments that get there very quickly, the screamers and yellers and hyperventilators. So I think, again, I'm going to go back to training. The more you can, that's where you get rid of that, is you keep training on it until you get it. It's not that we don't get it wrong. You don't train till you get it right. You train till you no longer get it wrong, basically. So, and the more repetitions you do with that, the better it gets. I mean, anyone who's taken a promotional exam, the tactical portion of it, for months, you're driving around in your car doing initial radio reports in front of just anonymous buildings all over. And that's kind of the competitive natures. We know we want to be operate at a high efficiency and kind of connect that to our reputation. So like the air traffic controller piece of this, the clinician part, it's almost robotic. Is you wash the emotions out and it becomes flat. And people who came to study our fire department would make those observations. They say, I dealt with this person, and then when we went to a fire to listen to them on the radio, they were completely different. And it is. It's like you flip a switch and say, okay, you control your breathing, you do all those things to get you down because you want to sound like a pro when you're talking on the radio. That carries weight, and people are wrongly or rightly identified by kind of their radio presence a lot of times.
I think good command presence really starts with the inflection and the volume and how that person sounds. And it really can instill a lot of confidence with the people on the fire ground versus the yelling and the screaming. So that's another point. Point number 4 that Bruno had is maintain an ideal volume, not too loud, not too soft. Any increase slightly or decrease in volume will send a message that matches the situation's urgency. Learn to modulate the sound of your voice to match the circumstances. A minor change in your volume can greatly affect the meaning of the message that you send.
I think on the fire ground that, we hear it and we see that, and events that seem out of control, if whoever's trying to get it in control is also out of control or says, I'm going to scream louder than the people who were already screaming, it just gets worse. So, my comparison to that is, kids. If your kids are already having a meltdown, it's not yelling louder than they are. It's you can bring them down, like by being calm and confident and, talking them down, just like the fire ground. I mean, if the first 2 company officers, excited or whatever's going on and not communicating clearly, that can be reset if you have a strong IC number 2 that's pulling up and can get control and talk them kind of, really in a roundabout way off the ledge. We just heard that a few podcasts ago with some of that Cobb County audio. The front end of it wasn't, great, but the battalion got there and totally got control of the whole thing. Calm, cool, assertive. And from that point forward, it was, very solid.
We're going to have all these in the show notes, by the way. So we're going to skip around a little bit, but if you want the full list, just go to the show notes and you'll be able to download this article. So skipping ahead to number 7, the IC's language is critical. Use simple, standard, understandable, actionable words arranged in short phrases that fits the receiver's listening span of control, which is limited based on compressed time and the usual level of fireground confusion. Creating a vernacular, we do that with Blue Card, but you've probably seen it gone off the rails before too, where somebody says one thing and it's interpreted as another.
I think he wrote this before Blue Card was Blue Card. I think this was still Fire Command, and we were pushing it towards Blue Card. Because you said it, Vance, is Blue Card refine that even greater. So the reports, assigning companies, you use a task, a location, and an objective. So your assignments, it matches everything else in the deployment model with the task level evolutions we do. That's all you can order. Is engines do water and ladders do support. So, and they both can do searches. So that's the menu. So you're going in and you should, if that's what's on the menu, that's what you should say over the radio, because that's what you're going to get at the end. So again, that all connects to training. So every time you go out and train, if you're doing company training where we're doing hose lays, okay, this is what, when I want this hose lay, this is how I order it and what it sounds like. So people used to ask, does the incident commander have to have a expert understanding of firefighting? And yes, they do. Well, couldn't they? No, they can't. An airplane pilot has an expert understanding of flying an airplane. That's an IC knows what engines and ladders do. If you don't, you shouldn't be an IC. I mean, it's pretty simple. So the foundation for the strategic level is understanding the capabilities and limitations of the task level.
I think they take it one step further in, Blue Card today with the communications, other words that mean something when people are trained and they know what they mean, like priority traffic in our system catches everybody's ear. Like this is not good. It's a red flag and it means something. Mm-hmm. And a status change means something. And a roof report means something. And, right on down the list, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday clearly means something. So, it's just clearing all that up and using good terminology that everybody's familiar with and is trained on and exercised before.
But skipping ahead to number 11, understand that the command post is really a listening post. Eliminate communication barriers. Quickly sequester yourself inside the command post vehicle in a strong vantage point. Realize that we will never achieve a strategic level of command until we get the IC, you, and a strategic command post. We heard it again last week, not bashing what goes on out there, but where an IC missed Maydays, missed 2 calls of a Mayday, and the dispatch center is actually running the Mayday. As the IC, you've got to be there for that radio communication.
I mean, I say it all the time, anytime we're in class or when we're in the field or anytime I'm talking with fire departments, the strategic ICs, one of their biggest jobs is to do active listening. And every time that an IC has to say unit with traffic, repeat your traffic, unit identify is a missed Mayday event. So if you're missing that and you're hearing that, then you're not active listening. You're being distracted by, something. And you can't really multitask. And that whole listening thing, if you're focused on talking or if you're focused on using, some device or on the computer or whatever you're doing, you're really not doing your job because the strategic IC is there to listen to the people who are working inside the IDLH.
You brought up a couple of classes ago, you never hear an air traffic controller say, airplane with last traffic, repeat again. I mean, just because that's their job is to sit there with headphones on and answer the aircraft. And likewise, that's our job in the command post, is to answer the units that are calling us and not make them call 2 or 3 times. I know we had talked in the past about how there's a lack of confidence. The confidence level goes down in that IC if people have to call over and over again. So how do we eliminate those distractions?
There are times where you'll have to, the IC will come back to somebody and say, hey, last unit, repeat, because the radio isn't working or they're covering each other. So in that sense, the IC becomes the air traffic controller. Say, okay, last unit, come back, you were covered, nobody heard what you said. Nothing will screw up an incident operation any quicker than a key task level unit with a bad radio. And, and we've all been to places where they'll start it off and it breaks up and you miss half of what they said. And then 2 minutes later, they're in another position and it's the same thing over and over. And really, you got to take that radio out as quickly as possible, because if it keeps going, it's going to screw it. And they don't know. They're just, they're not answering me. They keep talking. It's bad radio. So past a technical issue like that, it's incumbent on the IC to be there to receive those messages. And really, when you look at it, the front end of an incident is more talking. Because, okay, I sized it up, and this is what I need to put these 3 or 4 task level things into action, and that's going to take care of business right now. Once you get that done, then it's listening. So IC number 2, the whole time they're responding typically, because they're not there yet. They're listening. They get there, they verify what they heard, and then they kind of check in with everybody to make sure that they're doing what they need to, everything's okay. And then they're kind of reacting to what's going on, and then it's more of a command post. That's correct. In the command post, it's a listening post. Is you're making sure that they're doing, is the actions are producing the outcomes we want. So that's kind of the chart.
I think one of the things to help it is later on in this list, I'm not sure, don't remember what number it was, but it says the strategic IC should be in a vehicle and wearing a headset even, or consideration for wearing a headset. So it just makes it, I think, that much better that you're not as distracted, because that is all you're listening to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then it's incredible to watch is you take, like the first IC is mobile and they're off into the hazard zone. They quickly transfer to IC number 2. And then the third position is you pull them into a command post. So once you can support that IC in the command post and they got the headset on, it becomes a mind meld almost. And their awareness of what's going on around them goes away. They have no clue. We would do the incident, break the command post down, and before everybody left, we'd do a quick critique of what went on in the command post. The ICs never knew the length of time, the number of alarms, or who was in the command van while they were commanded. And you would tell them, no, the fire chief, the mayor, blah, blah, blah. It's not a second alarm. It was a 4th alarm. It wasn't 40 minutes. We were here 2 hours. And they lose all track, because it's almost like playing a game at that point. They've got tunnel vision through the window. They're listening to reports, and everything else is happening for them behind them. So they almost take it for granted, like, well, I did this and this. They say, yes, you did this, and then these other people did this, and then this took place, and there's a big machine that's supporting you strategically here. So that becomes, and the reason we build that is so that IC can manage the position and function of the people in the hazard zone, period.
Well, let's skip ahead to 13, because I think 13 on this list talks about that. Quickly assemble a standard command team. The senior advisor provides overall tactical operation insight. The support officer eliminates distraction static so the IC can focus on managing and protecting those in the hazard zone. I don't think we talk about it, but probably not enough. The ideal senior advisor, the ideal support officer. Let's start with the support officer, because that's usually the first one pulled in. What is the ideal support officer? And let's talk about their job description a little bit further in detail.
So the support officer, if you're just getting into a car, the support officer becomes that person that's going to manage that tactical worksheet. Could be the person listening to a second radio channel. If you're, don't have somebody, haven't built it out far enough yet to have somebody that's just taking care of that and getting rid of, some of those other moving parts. but also become somebody that you can kind of bounce information off of, right? So I think the support officer ends up filling really the senior advisor piece and a support officer piece, 2 jobs with one person until you get that third person. So, I mean, I think they're doing all of that, but the value is it's letting that strategic IC get back to 30,000 feet with a focus on, fire ground operations, the IDLH, and managing the hazard zone without having to focus so much or think about what are these other resources coming, who's the second alarm, all the other moving parts, as the incident escalates, all those other things that we all know happen on the fire ground with the police or news or somebody's got a question about whatever, and none of that matters. At that point, what matters is the IDLH for the strategic IC to manage that.
It was a really long time ago. And the command van was managed by staff deputies, right? So we show up at a big-ass fire one day, and we come in, and we call the IC over. And it was Garrison and his aide, his fit. And they're coming up, and the deputy chief said, well, no. He points to me, he says, you're the support officer. So he doesn't let Garrison's aide in the command van. And it's like, well, no, Sid, he's the support. He says, no, you're the chief, sit down. So he rearranges everybody. He doesn't let Sid in. Sid has the tactical worksheet. Sid's pissed off. He walks. So he takes the worksheet, crumples it up, throws it in the water in the gutter, and smokes a cigarette. Well, now Garrison's like, well, where's the worksheet? I don't know. I'm not the support officer. Where's Sid? Segi says, he's not Nick's the support officer. He says, Nick ain't got the tactical worksheet. Well, go get Sid. Well, Sid's gone. It screwed up the next 10, 12 minutes. You had to go back and figure out where everybody was because they did staffing by like invitation. You're like, no, this isn't. Well, no, we're not letting a captain in the command post. You're like, oh, Jesus, why are you here? We kept the wrong person out. So what we figured out was quickly is the battalion chief has a partner. They're fit or aide, whatever you want to call them. Well, it's a support officer. That's how it started. And there's nothing that says a deputy chief does it better than a captain, especially a captain that does it all the time. Deputy hadn't done it for 10 years. So you're like, no. These two know how to do this job. They meet the standards. Well, I have rank. Well, you're rank and you don't meet the standard. Stop it. So when we started doing, the precursor of blue card is we made it positional and say, no, these positions, if you operate here, here, or here, that's what this looks like. If you operate in the hazard zone, this is your limit. If you operate in a command post, this is it. We don't connect it to rank. It's to training and capability. So that kind of became the thing. Now, rank plays into it because that's part of the supervision and the hierarchy and the rest of it, the paramilitary backbone, or if you want to call it that. So. But you got to make sense of that on the instance scene and use qualified people to do whatever work needs to be done.
I think that's an important point about Blue Card is it's not rank driven. There are so many systems out there that if it's a 5-alarm fire, the fire chief of a large urban fire department has to have command. And that's not how Blue Card operates at all. It is all based on their position at the time, like, first arriving, second arriving, and their capabilities, not rank.
Yeah, it's hot zone, warm zone, cold zone. It's basically the way it goes. The rank comes in a little bit later in organization. It's a lot easier for a battalion chief to manage a division than a company officer. I'm company officer in charge of 4 other company officers here. We didn't build the fire department rank structure to support that. That's a little outside of the thing sometimes.
But there's systems out there that a captain's in a car by themselves as either a support officer or a safety officer.
And they're acting in that capacity. They're moved up to a chief then, essentially, is what it is. Yeah, I wouldn't stop doing that. I would just train to that capability. And you got to run what you brung. And if you have 2 chiefs, you're going to have to figure out how to do warm zone management with a different group of responders.
And let's talk about senior advisor then. So that's the third member of the team that gets brought in as the incident continues to escalate. So who is the senior advisor? Who's the ideal senior advisor?
Whoever's in charge of the shift. That's how we did it. As they were the ranking on-duty officer. So in our system, it was deputy chiefs. So you had fire chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, battalion chief, captain was the hierarchy. So shift commanders in our system were the senior advisor position, and they took care of that. And that worked pretty well. And that really, that was good because the shift commanders supervise and manage the battalion chiefs, basically. So it kind of completes that rank loop, I guess.
How about systems like ours, Josh, where we don't have somebody in charge of a shift because we only have one battalion chief? How do you overcome that in those kind of systems?
So, I mean, I think that's that mutual aid. And if you're going to run together, then you got to train together and be on the same system. So, just like when we talk about task level work, who you're going to send to do what, you have to understand their limitations and capability and what they might do or not do or how they might fit when they get into position. So it just can't be throw somebody into that spot because they could screw it all up and derail the whole thing. So it's got to come down to, is that person familiar with what that job really means? And they're going to stay in their lane, not, try to overrun command, not try to, do any of these other things, but really becomes more of another support piece for the incident commander. As always is said in a lot of these Blue Card podcasts, like an umbrella, like it keeps all the rest of those things off of the strategic IC. All those other support positions, that's really what they're there for, is to let the strategic IC focus, and those other people have, some specific things that they're responsible for, and they need to stay in their lane and take care of those pieces. And the only way to get to that is you have to have it written down in some sort of an SOP, then you have to train on it. And then, discuss how does this really look when we're going to use it? Because it's not going to be, all the time.
We've been talking here in the last week or two about who runs the fire department. Does the fire chief run the fire department? Well, see, operationally, like in my system, a shift commander had two different jobs. Is you managed incident response, so we were the senior advisor in the command post. And then the North Shift Commander managed the operations manual and training. And then the South Shift Commander managed the staffing in the morning. So South got everybody to work. North got them all trained and on the same page. And we've been laughing about who really runs the fire department. Is it the fire chief? Talking to Vance and Garrison, who runs it, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's my conjecture that they run the whole thing, but operationally, the ops chief and training chief run what everybody does on a day-to-day service. So like structure fire policies are enforced and implemented by the ops chief and the training chief. Well, when we went back to a shift commander system, is the South Shift Commander owned the operations manual and said, this is how we're going to manage this now. So we worked for the ops chief. And then the training chief was in a different division, and we kind of told the training chief, we got this. And the training chief, with his union partner, came in and said, no, you don't. We thought, yeah, we do, pal. I own 14 ladders, and you ain't getting past one of them. So we took over training operationally, which was kind of a political balancing act with going back to shift commanders kind of challenged the former system a little bit. But we supervised the work. We're going to do the training. Well, the fire chief said, I finally have the system that needs to be in place now to do this part of it. He spent the rest of his time figuring out the leadership side and the service delivery outside of the hazard zone, and was trying to duplicate what we had done in the CTC side in the everyday management side. So that became a very robust organizational system for managing the work and then kind of administratively of what we did in the position we had within the organization. So it was good fun. I mean, you had some juice, but you were at work all the time, one way or another. You were busy.
We always say everybody needs a boss too, and organizing battalions in a way that they're reporting to that boss really probably helps with accountability too.
Oh, it improved it In fact, when we went to shift commanders, is before that you had less than 10 people taking the BC's test. After we went back to shift commanders, is you had 50 and 60 people taking the BC's test. It moved that job up into the I want to do that order.
I think finally, with senior advisors, when you're on a complex incident, multiple alarms, you're going to need somebody there who can deal with all those issues, the mayor, the city manager, the governor's office. I mean, I've been on incidents as a senior advisor where somebody from the EPA shows up because the governor sent them there because someone saw a black plume of smoke. So keeping that away from the IC so the IC, like you said, they don't even realize all that stuff's going on in the background because you're taking care of it. You're taking that off their plate. They don't have to be concerned about it. All they're concerned about is the incident.
Really, when you have a senior advisor, the senior advisor is managing that incident. The IC is managing the IDLH. That's their focus, and your focus is supporting the rest of that operation and keeping that IC clean. In those cases, when you got the mayor and the governor and all those whoop-de-doos, you're going to have the fire chief there. Well, the fire chief is the perfect... Having a senior advisor is the best friend of the fire chief because they don't have to worry about that now, and they can do fire chief's executive level leadership at the incident scene. A huge deal. So they can kind of check in and make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing. The other thing that did is that system is we had 2 big ass command vans, so you could do 2 greater alarm operations simultaneously in the same city, which was kind of a big thing to be able to do. So it gave us a lot more capability to manage the workforce all the time.
I have a couple more here to hit before we go today. Number 14, organize command team helpers, manage channels, and enlist Alarm, the dispatch center, as an integrated, absolutely essential command and control partner. They have the most powerful electronic capability and the ability to monitor and control the overall deployment system. Dispatch, as you know, is left out in the equation in a lot of the American fire service unless you have a dedicated dispatch center. What are ways with agencies out there that do not have a dedicated dispatch center that's just fire, that's law enforcement, fire, and EMS or whatever? My dispatch center was also public works and everything else at one time. How do we get those dispatchers integrated into our system?
So, I think the first thing is you have to invite them and actually have a discussion with them. But, for far too long and still today, everybody looks at the dispatch center like there's people just sit in the room and they send us on incidents and they really don't have any capability. And that is not true. It's really the fire service's fault in a lot of cases about the dispatch center that we haven't made a true effort to push to get them on the same page and to work with them and to train them and to give them our expectations. I hear all the time, well, for the police department, they do all of these things. Well, the police department spends some time with them and like lays out some expectations and then does some training with them and then tells them the why behind what they're doing. And, dispatchers, if we would just tell them what we want them to do, but more importantly, why we want them to do what we want them to do, they will engage. And we're seeing that in all across our region right now in Ohio that they're latching on to this dispatch module that Blue Card has. And as they go through it, they're like, wow, this is amazing because we've never had anything. They always treated us like just sit in the room, shut up. And then they call and yell at us every chance they get because we didn't do what we didn't do what the fire department wanted us to do. And it's like, well, you never told them what to do. So how do they even know what to do? And then the other flip of that is the, regional dispatch centers where it's totally broken that, you could have 40 agencies being dispatched by one dispatch center with 40 different fire chiefs and they want 40 different ways. And that's a bunch of bullshit too, because how do you expect a agency to do all these different things? And it's like they have one CAD program that's really designed to dispatch one response type system, but they go in the back door of it and then try to make it work so that 40 different agencies can get 40 different things. And we want this many engines and these many ladders, and we want you on the radio or we don't want you on the radio. And it's just all over the place. So, it starts with the whole, expectations and training. But to get to that point, if you're in suburbia, you have to get all of the chiefs on board first.
Yeah, when we had just built the CTC, and there was like 4 or 5 people working on the building. Abbott was one of them at the time. And so we're building the simulator, and we got the guys from Digital Combustion there, and there's some people from City IT, and they're wiring everything and putting that together. One day Abbott shows up with a delivery guy in a pickup truck, and he's got a dispatch console in the back of it. And he says, we're going to move this into the captain's office. Really? And he says, yeah. So they wheel it in. And so we have this full-blown dispatch module. And they hook it up, and so we become an alternative dispatch site. So you could have dispatched for, I don't know, for our zip code, like, you know, with one console, but you could still hook in and dispatch and get in and do what you need to do. So Abbott, the first or second training session, he staffed the module, and he became the dispatcher. And that wasn't going to work forever. So we called the dispatch center and told them, hey, listen, we got this thing and blah, blah, blah. And we're kind of explaining the program to them. And they're like, well, yeah, that sounds great. What do you want us to do? And we said, well, we want you to come down and play the part of the dispatcher. And see, like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down, that was overtime. So she said, well, I don't know. We got this. I said, I got overtime. When do you need me? So we got arrangements, and she comes in and she starts, and she runs through the sim, and, you know, she gets the thing working. And so we do a sim or two, get everything worked out, and then we go, boom, full blast, start to finish. We drag everybody in the room, takes about 15 minutes, and we're going to do the review. She comes in with that, come on, we're all coming, going to review, and she sits in the back. She had been a trainer and a supervisor in the alarm room for 25 years, something like that. And so she starts asking questions. You know, we're doing the question and answer part. It's just, why do you do this? Why do you say this? Why do you do this? Who does this? And so you start, she says, so you can see it's like an epiphany. She's, okay, that does make sense now. Flipped it. Now the company, why do you do this? Why do you do this? And so pretty quick we had to say, hey, no, we're talking about the fire we just did. Quit bitching about EMS calls. This is not, we ain't doing that now. We get done. She says, when's the next? I give her the schedule. She comes back. About the second time she comes back, she says, can I bring young dispatchers with me that I'm training? Please do. So we got 2 or 3 people. So now she's training in real life. A few months goes by, another budget cycle. I have to call her and say, hey, I'm out of overtime. She says, damn it, I was doing this. This is working great, blah, 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 blah. So we skip a week or two. She calls back, says, hey, the hell with the overtime. I need to train these people. And it was the best way to do it. She says, half the time training them, doing simulations. You train them on what they need to know. What really that we worry about the most is hazard zone stuff with you guys. And so that just became the deal. So we did a joint training thing where there was always a dispatcher when we were doing basically command training out of the CTC. It improved relationships between the dispatch center and the field more than anything. I mean, I think there were children created, marriages and the rest at the end of it, where you brought, different disciplines together that made new humans. But it was the love of command that did that.
Brings us all together.
And they would come in and they say, I'm going to name the baby Alan. No, name it Vinny. That would be better. Vinny or Carlos. Yeah, we'll see.
More appropriate. Well, I think that, for us involving the dispatchers, letting them know what you're doing, getting them resources, getting them that blue card training. There's a module available, like Josh said, so we'll have that information on the show notes too.
Because dispatchers have saved my ass more than 4 or 5 times. They are an untapped magic lamp that we should use. They truly,
and most of them are calm and cool.
Oh,
and they don't get emotionally attached, but.
Yeah. When a dispatcher says, do you want the next alarm? Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. No, they know. The old dispatchers, they just know. They have a psychic intuitiveness about them.
Oh, it's a nice segue to number 15 here. Don't let the incident suck you in emotionally. Maintain a clinical detachment from the confusion. The command system, based on your words, depends on your ability to effectively communicate your way through a tough situation. When you have the screaming and yelling on the radio, well, okay, let's. The question is how have you guys throughout the years become emotionally unattached to the scene so you're not getting ramped up?
So I think part of it just comes down to experience. Like, you have to have run on events, and you have to, strive to be a professional, and then you have to understand what your job is. And if your job's the strategic IC sitting in a car, then, you have a responsibility and you practice that. So it becomes your job, right? And not saying that, we don't deal with things that, can get emotional with, like Maydays and whatever, but if the event is already going sideways and there's an emotional wreck happening because of a building on fire, when they find a victim and somebody starts screaming, it just gets worse. When somebody says Mayday, 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 and it was already out of control, it's going to get 10 times worse, and everybody gets ramped up. So, you have to start it at the beginning. It's not like one of those things that halfway through you can decide, okay, now we're going to handle this like a professional and be calm and cool and have a command presence.
I don't know. I like going from a company officer to being a battalion chief. It was you were in a sterile environment. It's nobody got fluids or any kind of liquid on you. There was it was a different thing, and I thought this is. It was cleaner. So, I was happy just that I was inside air-conditioned comfort in a car, and you could tell people what to do on the radio. They would do it. And so, but I think Josh is right. I think you have to have those experiences of, 10,000 reps of the pulp that you see every day as a firefighter. And you're going to respond to stuff that's nasty, and it's emotionally devastating for everybody. We've been on calls where an experienced ER went home with emotional PTSD after they found out what happened. I thought, it's pretty shitty, man. This is evil, what we just went through, but sorry, that's what we do for a living. And, I made sense of that as one day you're thinking, this is wretched, this is horrible, I can't believe it. And you thought, this would have happened whether I was here or not. The only reason I'm upset now is because I was here trying to do something to fix it, but this happens every 15 minutes somewhere, and I don't know about it, so I'm okay. Okay. And for whatever reason, the B shifter, and you make sense of it, makes whatever kind of moral bargain, and off you go into. But it is kind of crazy when you look back of the times that you were clinical and what you were clinical in front of. Sometimes you don't appreciate having done that in your life until you reflect, I guess. And you think, I was actually part of this, and we made it and got through it all. So, and I think that is how you grow yourself with leadership, and the whole thing is being somebody kind of in the system that people can count on and depend on. We talked about George Pickett, a guy who came to us from New York City in one of the West Valleys. And we were doing some Mayday stuff, that's a whole different thing. You will never get that off of you. If that happens to you, because that's inside the cult. So now it's, your uniform got Jimmy's blood on it, and that ain't ever coming off. And what he said was he investigated all the Maydays for FDNY for a period of years, and he would talk to the key principals that had the Mayday. And he said, to a person, the number one thing he came back with is, what was the thing that gave you the most calm and reassurance during this thing? And they all said it was dependent on who was in charge. And he says, if it was Tom, I knew I was going to live. If it was Jimmy, I'm screwed. And that was it. It was who is in command is kind of was the final takeaway.
Do you guys have any other ones from the list that are your favorites, or anything you'd like to bring up off this?
They're all just equally as important, Vance.
They are, and we will link the document in the show notes so everybody can get a copy of this. I think it's very important. Before we go, let's do Pilot's Tactical Truth. See, we can roll things in live now because we're in a studio.
Hey, now.
Yeah. So we do these timeless tactical truths from time to time. We have these playing cards available. You can get them at the B Shifter store. And at random, now you know the key. They're not really at random. But we will pull one out. We'll talk about it a little bit on our shows from time to time. So this is the 5 of clubs. And it says, to a major extent, the command system performs or doesn't perform based on the support and behavior of the ranking officer bosses who operate within that system before, during, and after the incident. So it starts before the incident. It can't just be at the incident. So let's start with before. What are the things that we do to set ourselves up for success?
Before you jump into that, I think if you want to know what it's going to look like at the incident, look at what it looked like 2 weeks before. And if you want to know what it looks like after the incident, look at it 2 weeks before. Because however we act all the time is how we're going to act all the time. And, you know, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do all the time, like lining up, doing what you're supposed to do, training, meeting expectations, holding people accountable, then don't expect that at the incident. So, I mean, it has to be all the time.
Yeah, you get out of it what you put in it. So the front end, everybody's ready to go to work and they're all on the same page. At the event, you use the existing stuff you trained on. That's the beauty of Blue Card. It takes it from the simulation, is what I say. And this is the thing about this program, is it creates an instant improvement when you start doing it, and you can visibly see it and measure it. And I'll give you on deck as an example. We're going to do on deck in Phoenix, Arizona. When are we going to go to it? Well, we did the class. Everybody's in the room. They say, okay, when's this happen? Now. So this is it. Yeah, for us, it is. If we get a fire tonight, this is we got a fire that night. And it went exactly the way it went at noon at 10 o'clock at night. No difference. Engine 26 said, I'm on deck, front yard. I'm coming to get the rig stuff out of your rig. Oh, wow, I forgot about getting the rig stuff. 26. Thank God I told them. They remembered. So that's what it looked like. It was good. And that, like Josh said, and then that's what you say, I'm going to hold you to this. Well, no, what it is we're going to do a review at the end. And did it go the way we said it was going to go at noon? Yeah, it went exactly the way. Hug and kiss. I'll see you guys next time, man. Great. That's it.
Awesome. And then after, what do we do after? You were talking about 2 weeks before. And I really think that if you're dysfunctional, you're not going to perform very well on the scene. But afterwards, how do we make up that part?
You only do anything afterwards if you're really looking to improve. I mean, otherwise it's just nobody got hurt, killed, and we all made it back and all's good. But the 2 weeks after part is these things happen. It's that after action piece. Like, hey, these 10 things were really good to reinforce behavior, but these couple things we can improve on as an organization, or maybe we need to adjust a policy, or maybe there's a training component missing, whatever it is. That's what it looks like, afterwards. After whatever occurred, reinforce good behavior and, try to correct bad behavior.
Yeah, it's just the improvement model. Garrison called it an accountability model, but it's just constant improvement. And the way you do that, you do an after-action review, and you verify, okay, we had this, we did this, it worked this well. If there's a problem, you say, we had this problem. It could be a piece of gear, it could be a policy, it could be a company that's not up to standards, it could be any number of things. So you got to figure out, okay, this didn't work the way it should have. Why? Once you ascertain why, then you take steps to fix it, and then you gets roped back in. Well, if it's a policy, you got to change that policy. That policy gets changed, you train on it, and you keep doing the thing. It keeps repeating every time. It's a pretty simple system. That is a far better use of our time to manage people than doing employee evaluations. In fact, I started using incident operations as like the basis of the company grading for the officers that I had. 0 citizens complaints. Well, that says something right there. Hey, this is the way this person operates. So it's what the organization values the most, you put up front and say, this is what we do. Well, it could be rescue, fire control, property conservation, prevent harm, survive, be nice, all those things. It's all kind of connected to the same job list. So,
All right. Thanks for being here today.
thanks for having us, Vance.
It's good to see you guys.
Woohoo!